Hello everyone, my name is Blaze Lightfoot Jones-Yellen, Eastern Regional Coordinator for the Nature Conservancy's Leaders in Environmental Action for the Future program, and welcome to today's virtual career fair. Today we're going to talk to three professionals about their careers in engineering, ecology, and advocacy, and how they got to where they are today. We'll also talk about different paths you can take to get into the field and fulfill your own passions for a STEM or advocacy career. Before we meet our panelists, let me tell you a bit about how I got into a green career. Some might think it's surprising for a kid growing up around New York City to be interested in the environment, but I had parents who would bring me upstate to experience the outdoors, to go hiking and camping, and really allowed me to develop an appreciation for the natural world. Back home in the city, I noticed most of my peers didn't have that same experience or share those same environmental ethics. I decided I wanted to learn more about the environment and help connect people to nature, in particularly helping young people in cities find a place for themselves in the environmental movement. Now let's meet our panelists. First up, Monica is a manager of assembly engineering at Pratt & Whitney. Hi Monica, how are you today?
Hi Blaze, I'm doing well. How's everybody?
We're glad to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a bit about your background and what inspired you to pursue a career in engineering?
I graduated from the University of Puerto Rico with a mechanical engineering degree, and I grew up and seeing my parents kind of work around the cars and try to troubleshoot some of the equipment that anything that failed, and that made me look for a career that I can actually be part of creating new machines or new innovation, and that's what brought me into mechanical engineering. I am now part of the Pratt & Whitney West Palm Beach campus, and I work as an assembly engineer on the development of commercial and military engines, and it's just a very interesting and dynamic career.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. We're glad to have you. Next, let's go over and meet Ray, an ecologist for large carnivores, currently studying human-carnivore conflict. Ray, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Human-carnivore conflict, Ray, what led you to that career?
Yeah, I definitely arrived at this career through a non-traditional path. I grew up in the city in San Francisco, I think the best city in the world. And I was an urban kid, and my only exposure to nature growing up was through television. So I actually watched a ton of nature shows on TV when I was growing up, and I always envisioned and hoped that I would one day be able to explore those environments and see those animals and wildlife in their natural habitats. And by some stroke of luck, I actually ended up pursuing it in school and haven't turned back since.
Great. I'm sure a lot of young people can relate to your story. Let's go over to our third panelist, Khalil, the Urban Conservation Director for the Maryland, D.C. chapter of the Nature Conservancy. Khalil, how are you today?
I'm great, Blaze. How you doing?
I'm well. Thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a bit about your background?
Sure, and I'm honored to be on this panel with other distinguished guests. I gotta tell you, I'm not a scientist. I'm not an engineer. Numbers are not my forte. I grew up actually in Washington, D.C., but when I was a young guy, my family, we moved out to Nairobi, Kenya, grew up in Africa, and I had the really amazing opportunity of going on safaris, going to national parks, game parks, and seeing wildlife there, but also learned about some of the challenges for wildlife, the poaching, the loss of habitat with rapid urbanization, and how that led to conflicts. And there were a couple of events over there with some of the ivory that was captured from poachers that were seminal moments in my life. And all of that was driven by environmental policy. And that's where I got interested, knowing that science is not my forte, but being able to have an impact through policy and being able to influence decisions that affect wildlife, that affect nature, that affect our environment is what got me excited in being an environmental advocate today.
Great. Well, we're glad to have you. It's just about time to go over and meet our classroom. Joining us from the New York Harbor School, joining us live. But first, let's learn a little bit more about the school.
there's a calling for kids with unique attributes, and those kids are at Harbor School.
It's not like all the regular high schools that my friends go to.
I guess it's really unique, and you have opportunities that not a lot of kids have.
Like, how many high school kids get to go out in the water every day, get to go sailing, or get to go out on the boat, get to go scuba diving, or work on oyster reefs and all that?
You're learning, and at the same time you're having fun.
Middle school friends basically call my school mythical because they don't believe I'm doing any of these things. They just see it as, okay, it's in my imagination.
Wow, that looks like an awesome place to go to high school. Let's go over and meet them. Mauricio, thank you for joining us. Are you there?
Yep, here I am. Can you hear me?
I can. You're coming through loud and clear. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and the New York Harbor School?
Sure. So I identify a lot with Khalil in the sense that I studied in South America. I studied marine biology in South America. And working in research there, I figured out that research only had, it could only go so far. And so I made a decision to come back to New York City and start teaching because I felt that it was a lot more valuable to be able to do research with kids so that they can make a difference in the world, and so that things just didn't get stuck in universities and libraries, and I thought that was a lot more valuable. So coming to New York City, I founded and now I'm the director of the Marine Biology Research Program here at the New York Harbor School in the heart of New York Harbor. And this program specifically focuses on of the action. So having students think of real world problems that they want to solve, and then helping to guide them along gently and actually minimally so that they can develop their creativity and actually their expertise and their brilliance and put their work to action. And so I'm going to introduce Grace here behind me, who's going to give you a little more overview of the other programs that we have here at the Harbor School.
Hi, my name is Grace Carter, and I'm a senior at the Marine Biology program. Culture is where students support the Billion Oyster Project and are taught how to grow oysters, create hydroponic systems, and most importantly, keep things alive. Marine biology, students are encouraged to study what interests them in this independent study course with an emphasis on restoration and conservation of our surrounding ecosystem. The New York Harbor is where students can receive up to their master diver and dive master and place the oyster cages in the water at BOP restoration sites around New York City. Ocean engineering is where students design remotely operated vehicles to aid in the overall conservation project of the Harbor School. Technology, students learn to repair and build boats. They learn about woodworking techniques, electrical systems, and fiberglass handling. And vessel operations. Students get a hands-on experience when learning about what it's like to control a water vessel.
Wow, that's quite the suite of programs. All right, it's time to get started. So a big part of developing a successful career is having mentors to provide guidance and support. So let's go over to Monica. Monica, when you were younger, did you have any mentors during your education? And if so, how did you find them?
As I was growing up, I didn't really have a mentor. I'm the first engineer in the family. But indirectly, I would say my parents were somewhat of my mentors. They guided me to follow what I was good at and what my dreams were. As I chose to select engineering as my career, I did a lot of research in the internet, and back then there wasn't that many resources, so I had to go to books and everything. And then as I started going to college and learning more about what engineering was, I talked to other classmates that I met through engineering school and asked them, different experiences they might have had already, or people that were a few years beyond me. And through them, I kind of obtained some mentorship of what I wanted to choose. So I would encourage everybody to just try to get some guidance and seek people that can steer them in the right direction.
Thank you, Monica. What about you, Ray? Tell us about your mentors.
Yeah, certainly. So I certainly would not be where I am today without the help of some tremendous mentors I had along the way. When I was much younger, when I was in middle school and high school and even early college, I had informal mentors, kind of like Monica. So there were people in my life that I didn't even realize were providing me mentorship, in the form of guidance counselors who treated me a little bit different than other guidance counselors did. You know, some adults in my life who treated me like an adult myself instead of dismissing me as a silly teenager. So they weren't necessarily scientists who could guide me in my scientific pursuits, but they were people who empowered me in different ways. And I can look back now and see that they were tremendous mentors. And I owe so much of who I am now to them. Once I did get into the university system, I was able to get formal mentors. So people who were the types of scientists that I wanted to be when I grew up. And definitely those folks allowed me to, or opened doors for me that wouldn't have been opened otherwise. And now I'm in a position to hopefully be able to do the same for young scientists coming up.
Great, great. Thank you. Khalil, do you have any additional advice on how to find mentors?
Absolutely. You know, now when I look back and think about did I have any mentors, I can tell you I totally did. At the time, I didn't realize it though. Similar to what Monica and Ray were saying, I had a number of different teachers, professors, coach, or even people that were students, but that were a little bit more advanced or in a higher grade or program than I was, that served as mentors that gave me a lot of great career advice, a lot of great academic advising advice, a lot of great life advice. And when I look back, I think two regrets I have is that I didn't take advantage of this opportunity more. When I look back, I realized that they were mentors to me because they enjoyed it and they wanted to help. And it's not a burden for them. For them, this is something they want to do. And so I wish I had taken more time to spend more time talking with them, be more intentional with them, get more advice from them, and think about it strategically moving forward. And so I think it's very important to have a mentor. And I'm also, as Ray said, looking forward to being in that position now as I mature in my career to mentor others as well.
Thank you, Khalil. Really great advice. Really great advice all around. This next question is for Monica. Monica, what has your experience been working as an engineer, and do you have any advice for women who want to become engineers?
My engineering career, it's very dynamic. It's a collaboration of teamwork. I get to work on a daily basis, working on prototypes and being able to develop them. But I work as a team, and we troubleshoot any issues that we might find and also come up with innovative ideas on how to improve either processes or even the product. As a woman, I would say just follow your dream, find what you are interested in and go for it. You're not alone. There's a lot of people around you that will help you and guide you and mentor you. And anything you have your mind set, you will be able to achieve.
Fantastic. Can you also tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you may have faced so far in your career, Monica?
Some of the challenges I faced, at one point during my high school, I had one person who, once I found out I was going to try to pursue a career engineering, he kind of did not really encourage me, and I found that challenging, and I wanted to prove that person wrong. So I went ahead and continued to pursue what I really wanted to do. As I started college, I did find some of the classes were a little bit challenging as well, but that to me was just more motivation to stay focused and be able to follow what I really wanted to do. There will be some classes that you'll find more challenging than others. We're not really good at everything that we do, but just try to stay focused, reach out to other people to try to help you guide through it. And there's always going to be challenges and barriers posed, but just keep focused and you will make a difference. So just stick to your plan and be able to make a better future.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you. Ray, this one's for you. What would you say to a student who doesn't have an interest in a STEM career now, and what makes your job so cool that other students might be interested in it in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I love to talk about things like that. So what I always love to tell students is something that took me a long time to learn, which is, being in a STEM career doesn't necessarily mean you are wearing a white lab coat and are stuck in a building with no windows all day. I'm a scientist and I work outdoors a lot of the time, and I work with wildlife and I work with amazing people in amazing places all around the world. Time to realize that there was a science to that, because I was originally introduced to it through television. And so I would tell a lot of people that it's important to understand what you're passionate about and see if there is a connection to science or to engineering or to technology or math there. Because sometimes it can be really subtle and we don't always have the right mentors or the right leaders in the field to show us that science isn't just one thing. It's not just medicine. That's really important, but it goes way beyond that.
Thank you. Great. Let's go over to Khalil. Khalil, you talked about advocacy in your introduction. What does that mean exactly, and how does it support science at the Nature Conservancy?
Yeah, that's a great question, Blaze. And when you think about advocacy, to be an advocate, you are taking a position on something, supporting something or opposing something. So it could be a specific government policy. It could be as simple as when I'm at home and I want to watch a certain movie with my family, I am advocating to watch that movie. So taking a position on something is being an advocate. And when we think about policy and the type of environmental policies that we want to see, at the Nature Conservancy, we want that to be shaped by science, by good, sound science. When we're thinking about what type of pollution levels should be mandated as removed out of rivers, we want that to be based on science. Any of these other different environmental policies, we want to come from science. At the same time, a lot of policy that we advocate for helps to inform science. Advocating for policy where there's funding to do more science and more research is so important. So there's this huge interconnection of what it is we're researching, what's the information we're getting, and how do we then turn that into policies and we see impact on the ground right away.
Thank you, Khalil. Now that we've had a chance to hear from our panelists, let's go to some of the questions coming in from our virtual audience. This first question is for Monica from Kathy. What has been your favorite project and why?
My favorite project has been, I've been working most recently with an engine that it's been very good for the environment. Right now we're trying to work on fuel efficiency, noise reduction, and I've been part of that since the beginning. I was able to build the first prototype, and I was able to be part of a team. Once we built that prototype, I took it to test, and we performed several testing, such as you expose the engines to any environment that the engine's actually going to face, and such as dust ingestion, experiencing different air fluctuations, etc. And it has been very exciting just to see how the engine behaves, and knowing that at the end it's very rewarding. It's going to be very useful for the future to be able to connect families together and even ourselves travel worldwide. And just knowing that I am part of that is very rewarding, and it's very exciting.
Thank you, Monica. This next question is for all of the panelists, but maybe we can start with Monica, go to Ray next, and then Khalil. This is from Jomar. What were your majors in college, and how did those majors translate into the real world? Maybe briefly for all three panelists.
I studied mechanical engineering, and how that translated to the real world is based on my degree, I developed the fundamentals to be able to understand how many of the mechanisms, to understand how things around us work. And I've been able to relate to it. And sometimes when you just run into like a minor glitch, let's say for example on working with a coffee pot or anything like that, I put my engineering cap on and think about how I can, fix the issue or try to maybe think of something innovative to help get it back up and working.
Great, thank you, Monica. Let's go over to Ray. Ray, what was your major and how did it translate into the real world?
Yeah, well, I think it's worth noting that I started college as a biology major my freshman year. I thought for sure that's what I wanted to do. And I soon realized that all the other biology majors were pre-med and they wanted to go to medical school and be doctors. And that wasn't for me. I was really interested in macrobiology, so studying the entire organism, like an animal, instead of microbiology, like what's inside the animal and how does it work, the cells and the blood and all of that. So I abandoned biology and kind of lost my way for a little bit. Started studying journalism instead and completely changed my major. Figured out I hated that. And by some interesting grace of God, I found a professor in the environmental science department who suggested that I try environmental science. I had never heard of that before. I didn't know it was a major. I didn't know it was a thing at all. And that professor listened to my interests and said, absolutely, this is for you. And I was an environmental science major, and that worked and propelled me in my career. I use it every day, of course. I'm still an environmental scientist. In particular, I'm a carnivore ecologist, so it's a small subset of environmental science. But having studied that in school, it allows me to talk with all of my colleagues where I work, and also, of course, to understand a lot of what's going on the planet and in our climate today.
Thank you, Ray. Let's go over to Khalil. Khalil, what was your major, and how are you applying it in the real world?
Yeah, and there's a couple ways I think about answering this question. My undergraduate degree was in international studies. I thought I want to go overseas again. I want to do work in developing countries across the world. And I realized there's a lot of work that we can do in our own backyards here. You don't have to go overseas to find environmental problems. But what was really interesting about my major was that it taught me a lot about working with people, working with systems, working with organizations, how policy gets passed on an international level as well as on a local level, and how to navigate those processes, almost like a game of chess, as it were, and how to work with people. Because in any career you're in, you have to learn how to work with partners, with other stakeholders, etc. How to work with allies and how to navigate working around opponents. And I use that on a daily basis as we're doing projects, project management, building restoration projects. You have to learn how to work and engage people successfully. Otherwise, it'll be hard to move things forward. And so that's where it was really useful for me. In my master's, I got a master's degree in nonprofit management as well as environmental policy, which helped to sharpen those skills a little bit more.
Thank you, Khalil. And these are great questions coming in from our viewers. Please keep them coming. It looks like we now have some questions from students at the New York Harbor School. Let's take it over to them now. Kayla Scott, are you there? What's your question?
Blaze, what's unique about the way you encourage young adults to pursue environmental or conservation careers?
What I think is amazing about our programs is the depth of the experiences. Our students leave home for the summer to live, work, and play on Nature Conservancy preserves around the country. They become immersed in nature, often for the first time, immersed in conservation careers and leadership. And they come home having had a truly transformative experience and can now see a place for themselves in the environmental movement. Thank you for your question. This next question looks like it comes from Melanie Smith. Melanie, are you there? What's your question?
Hi, my question's for Dr. Ray. What is one of the most amazing experiences you've had traveling around the world and conducting research in the field?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you so much for your question. I have to cheat a little bit and say that pretty much all of my experiences are amazing and life-changing in some way. It's great to go to super remote parts of the world and study wildlife in their natural habitat. Most recently, I was on an expedition, a National Geographic expedition to Madagascar, and spent a month in a rainforest that had never been explored by anyone ever in the world. And I was with a team, and we discovered new species of mammals, plants, reptiles, and amphibians, and insects. And so if you guys are National Geographic readers, you'll be reading about this huge expedition in the summer. And so that right now is probably the moment that sticks out the most in my mind. But I've been truly fortunate to experience many, many, many life-changing trips.
So cool, Ray. This next question looks like it's coming from Jared Rosen. Jared, are you there? And it looks like you have a question for Khalil. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello. So Khalil, how would you say your background has influenced your work at the Nature Conservancy?
Yeah, I think that my experience, my academic experience, as well as my previous work background has been very important because a lot of the work I do is, I'm a bit of a generalist, for lack of another term. I do a lot of work that involves meeting with the City Council in Washington, D.C., as well as meeting with people in the private sector, investors, developers who build buildings, as well as working with other environmental and nonprofit groups, and working with property owners. And so I do a bit of project management, I do a bit of construction management, of managing some scientific research, as well as digesting that, and then turning it into something that you can translate and share with elected officials, because sometimes it's hard to take something really complicated and scientific and turn it into short sentences and bite-sized that you can then go and share with elected officials. And so being able to get my fingers in all of these different types of activities has been useful, from learning about policy and science and so many other different types of things. And in my previous job as well, working in policy down in Miami and in the Everglades, it gave me the experience of doing similar things and working with energy utilities, working with local city council government. And I'm just gonna steal this time a little bit to answer the question before. It gave me a cool opportunity where a couple years ago I was standing out in the middle of the Everglades, looking at the wildlife there with Vice President Joe Biden. Those are the amazing opportunities you get through advocacy and policy type work.
Thank you, Khalil. Looks like we have one more question coming in from Eric Weimer. Eric, are you there? What do you got for us?
Hi, my question's for Monica. What advice would you give a young adult who's kind of on the fence about going to a STEM field?
My advice would be there's a world of engineering. You can go into so many fields, whether it's chemical, mechanical, computer science, but always think that you are going to create an impact in the world. You're going to use your imagination. It's innovative, and at the end is very rewarding. Just follow your dreams. Try to look at what paths and what motivates you, and just pursue it. There's going to be more people that are going to help you and guide you and be able to open the road for you. And as an engineer, there's so many engineering aspects around you, and it's going to be something that you will find, and it's very rewarding.
Thank you, Monica. Khalil, we got one for you. Since many people in the world are now living in cities, I'm curious to know what this urban expansion means for your career.
Yeah, it's interesting if you think about it. We are in the midst of a great migration right now of people, masses and masses of people moving into cities. And as we talk about the environment and nature and how we look at that, we see this conversation shifting quite a bit, especially at the Nature Conservancy, where we've often talked about how do we deal with nature that's out there. And now we're really thinking about, still looking at that, how do we think about nature that's right here where people are? How do we think about how people impact nature in cities and vice versa? The benefits that nature provides to people. Tree canopy to reduce the heat island effect or to help filter the air and filter the water. The psychological benefits of having green spaces and parks in cities. And so we're really starting to think about urban design, urban planning comprehensively, and cities as ecosystems where we have massive amounts of people living there and not in conflict with nature, but how do we think about them as in concert and together with nature? And I think it's a huge, it's a new field, and there's going to be a lot of careers in this field in the coming years.
A new and growing field. Thank you, Khalil. This one's for Monica. Monica, of all the types of engineering out there, how did you choose which field of engineering to specialize in?
As I grew up, I went to different places. There were many aspects during my life that encouraged me to go primarily into mechanical engineering. Some of the aspects are, for example, seeing my dad work around the car, and I wanted to kind of help and jump in and get my hands greasy and understand how a car engine worked. So I kind of wanted to, it motivated me into going into the mechanical engineering field so that I can understand and be able to help troubleshoot. Another aspect is, for example, traveling. I got to go to Disney and experience the roller coasters. And to me, it was like a light bulb come in and say, well, this is interesting. How do the people make roller coasters? How do they work? And that kind of got me into the interest of how things work, looking at airplanes take off, and being part of a flight experience. All those things kind of really motivated me into going into mechanical engineering and now working for an aerospace industry.
Thank you, Monica. Let's go over to Ray now. Ray, what are some of the benefits that you see of having more diversity in the workplace?
Yeah, certainly. There's a couple of different cases for increasing diversity and supporting diversity initiatives in workplaces. There's one that we call the business case, which essentially means that there's a lot of evidence, actual scientific studies that have been done that are able to prove that diverse groups of people are better at solving problems. And that means racially diverse groups are better at solving problems than non-racially diverse groups. And groups with more gender diversity are better than other homogenous groups. That's really important to consider because especially in conservation and environmental science, we are trying to solve problems. It's our mission. And the problems are critical in terms of keeping this planet healthy and functioning. There's also plenty of other cases for increasing diversity, the most important to me being the moral case. It's the right thing to do. There are lots of different types of people who've been discriminated against, oppressed, and actually legally kept out of these fields and barred from pursuing STEM fields. And it's necessary to make amends for that history of oppression and to bring people into these fields because everyone has a shot at these types of careers.
This is really an important subject, and it brings up another great question for me. Thank you, Ray. There's just a follow-up question for you. So when you go on a job interview, for example, we know that it's sort of a two-way interview where you're interviewing the employer as much as they're interviewing you. What are some things you look for in an organization that tell you they're an inclusive place to work?
Yeah, that's a great question, Blaze, and it's really important for a lot of our audience members to consider before they start the job application process. And what I always look for is just a simple acknowledgement of problems. I don't necessarily expect an organization that I'm interviewing at to have figured out how to be completely diverse and equitable, but I would like for them to acknowledge the fact that there is a problem and they're working to solve it. Just that openness and that transparency to me speaks to an inclusive workplace. As well, I always think it's good when there is fair and equitable treatment of people, when there are harassment policies in place, terms of conduct codes, etc. That's always important just to make sure that there is some type of mechanism to deal with problems as they arise. And third, just to make sure that institutions are supportive when there are things going on that might impact my ability to do my job. When there are social justice issues that are really pressing and might concern me and some of my interest groups, it's great to have a supportive community in the workplace that can acknowledge my work might be impacted by what's going on outside.
Thank you, Ray. I'd like to ask Khalil if you have anything to add on the subject of inclusion at the workplace.
I think it's important. I mean, when we look at ecosystems, and ecosystems with large amounts of biodiversity are the ones that are going to survive better. And if you get into a monoculture, a mono ecosystem, it's not going to survive. And I think it's the same in the workplace. The more different perspectives you have, the better equipped you're going to be to solve problems. And that includes things like racial, gender, but as well as regional. People that might come from similar backgrounds but different parts of the world might have different perspectives on things. So I think inclusion and diversity is incredibly important, especially with the challenges that we're facing today are just getting more and more complex. So we're going to need more and more intricate and involved solutions to help deal with some of these.
Thank you, and you guys are stimulating great questions from our audience. We have one coming in here for Khalil, going back to the question around mentoring. Khalil, how would you suggest approaching someone to be your mentor?
That's a really good question. And I guess it's funny because, like I said, when I look back, I didn't realize someone was a mentor. So I never really went up and approached them. But I think if you can kind of do a bit of an analysis and think about who are people in my life that I look to for guidance, that I'm involved with on a consistent basis, and that I really value their opinion. And I would say sit down with them and just talk with them about what you're interested in, and say you'd like to set up a time with them to on a regular basis get some of their insights on questions you have. Ask them, say, hey, I would be really honored if you could be my mentor. I think if you would ask that of somebody, they would be very honored to do that, and I think you'd be hard pressed for somebody to say no to that. I'm hoping that somebody asks me to do that sometime soon. But I would say just be honest about it and be forward and seize the opportunity.
Thank you. We have another question from our virtual audience. This one is for Monica from Joseph. Monica, what were the steps you had to take starting in elementary school to get where you are today?
Let's see, starting in elementary school, I really didn't think I was going to study engineering in elementary school. I was thinking more I would like to be a pediatrician because I was very interested in working with babies. I was very, very into that. So I wasn't really pursuing anything at that point in time. When I got to high school is when obviously you start thinking, okay, I want to go to college. What do I want to focus on? I did notice that I was pretty good in math and science, and I kind of tried to look for guidance in what fields should I look that also allowed me to use my strengths, which in that situation was math and science. But I also wanted to look, I was into sports. I played a lot of sports as I was growing up, and I wanted something that was very dynamic, that I could interact with multiple people and be part of a team player, just like in a team environment. So those are the things that I kind of, used as a resource and looked and researched based on that. Well, what things could I do that I can be very dynamic, that I can be innovative, that I can use math and science? And I guess at that point I went to my guidance counselor, and she said, well, based on that, why don't you try engineering? And I said, okay, I'll start looking into that. And a little bit of research and trying to understand the different fields in engineering, and looking at my past and thinking about, just like Tinkerbell, you want to be able to tinker and be innovative. That's what really guided me into choosing engineering. So what I would encourage everybody is to kind of understand what you're good at, what you're really interested in, and just focus on that, and then research and look for mentorship, as we've mentioned, so that you can actually select the right field for you.
Thank you, Monica. We're going to go back to the New York Harbor School now to speak with Grace and Katha. Grace and Katha, what have you learned at the Harbor School about different career paths? And what advice do you have for other students who may be interested in technical or STEM careers, but maybe they're worried about the requirements?
Well, I learned as a female that I need to be competitive in the STEM field, and that is something I wouldn't have learned if I hadn't come to the New York Harbor School. From the marine biology program, is one of many different outcomes that I can accomplish in college when I leave.
Well, being at the Harbor School, I learned that there are so many different STEM opportunities for like everyone. I have been handling here. Learned I learned how to genetically identify organisms. I have volunteered with the BOP. There's just so much opportunity out there. You just have to go and look for it. And if I didn't go to this school, I don't know if it was even available.
For upcoming students who are looking for STEM programs is that don't give up, and even if you seem like you want to give up, don't. All of the work that you do is really accomplishing, and you can succeed in almost everywhere if you keep going.
Thank you both. Thank you, Grace and Katha. Let's go over to Monica now. I think you began answering this question earlier. I'd like to try to finish your thought for our audience here. Can you just tell us one or two things that students should start doing now if they want to pursue a career in engineering?
Sure. One of the things I would recommend is there's over 40 engineering fields out there, chemical, civil, but there's a lot of engineering fields that you didn't even think about. Just try to do a little bit of research and try to find what your likes are, what you're good at. I mean, there's even engineering in, if you're into movies and into doing the visual effects, etc. Those are things that you can go into the engineering field. In addition to that, I would encourage you to find out within your areas what clubs, memberships, organizations, such as robotics groups. There's a lot of kids using Minecraft, and those are really things that expose you to some of the basics of engineering and will help you understand and maybe even narrow your fields down as to where you would like to be headed. So do a little bit of research, try to understand what engineering fields are out there, and based on what you're interested in, also try to be part of organizations and clubs and memberships or even events that they might offer within your area that will help you get some exposure to it and understand what you would like to do as you grow up and you choose a career.
Great advice. Thank you, Monica. Let's go over to Ray. I've got a two-part question for you. I'd like you to answer the same question that Monica answered about what are one or two things young people could do if they're interested in working with animals like you. And in addition to that, can you talk a little bit about conservation career opportunities outside of academia?
Yes, certainly happy to talk about both of those things. If you're interested in working with animals, I think there's a lot you need to understand. The first advice I give is that I'm not necessarily the perfect model. I went through a lot of different academic institutions. I did school and then more school and then more school and then more school. You don't need to necessarily follow that path to be a conservation ecologist or to work with wildlife. Sometimes you don't need a degree at all. You do need some type of experience, and volunteer experience is always available. That's not necessarily always an option for people. It wasn't an option for me growing up. But certainly there are many, many different ways. Internships, volunteering, etc. Even just finding out within yourself what is your favorite animal and why, and then figuring out who works on that animal, and then just exploring how those people got to their careers. So being curious is a really, really good thing. I always also like to note that even if you are interested in science but aren't necessarily performing at the A++ level in your science classes, don't let that discourage you. I think probably many of us here, even on this panel, didn't always get straight A's in our science classes. I personally really struggled through a lot of science and math, especially in high school. And I was discouraged from pursuing science, discouraged from pursuing wildlife biology because of that, and I'm so glad that miraculously I stuck to it. In terms of careers outside of academia essentially means the university system. So often when people start in college or universities, they can stay there forever doing their science. And that isn't necessarily the only way to be a conservation biologist. There are a lot of organizations that are nonprofits There's the Nature Conservancy, there's the World Wildlife Fund, Conservation International, many, many, many different organizations that have scientists there, as well as environmental policymakers, as well as lawyers, as well as social scientists. There's a lot of different people working at these nonprofits in an interdisciplinary way to solve conservation problems. So there's that, there's the government. The government actually does a lot of conservation work, a lot of people don't realize. And I could go on forever about all the different opportunities outside of academia.
Great, thank you for sharing those things. Unfortunately, folks, this is the end of our career fair. But before you go, check out Earth Echo International's website. Like his father and grandfather before him, Earth Echo's founder, Philippe Cousteau Jr., spent his life exploring the planet. Earth Echo has requested acknowledgement of United Technologies' support of Earth Echo in bringing modern-day explorers to classrooms with STEM Explore. STEM Explore features dozens of relatable day-in-the-life interviews with scientists and engineers in STEM fields as diverse as dendrochronology, marine biology, and mechanical engineering. The Cabinet of Curiosities is inspired by the vast collection of items from 3 generations of Cousteau explorers. Meet the amazing people who unearth, study, create, or protect these amazing curiosities, and learn how you can become one of them. It was an honor to be the host of today's career fair. If you want to stay in touch with me, follow @BlazeLightfoot on Instagram and Twitter. I'm always sharing tools, tips, and tactics for young and aspiring STEM professionals. I hope everyone joining today learned something new about pursuing a career in STEM or advocacy. Thank you to everyone for joining us for today's virtual career fair, made possible with generous support from Lowe's. And I'd just like to give a special shout out to the New York Harbor School students. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye. We really appreciate your questions and participation. Keep up the good work out there. Ray, Monica, and Khalil, we couldn't have done this without you. Thank you so much for your great advice. I hope everyone joining today feels inspired. I know I sure do. Many thanks for everyone for tuning in. Take care and goodbye.